Daf Gimel Amud Aleph, 7 lines from the top. Continue on in the discussion of or. When you say or larabasar, it doesn't mean day, it doesn't mean night. May say another kasha to Rav Huna, who says that or means day. It says yochel yehi nechal or lishlishi. You might think that a shlom can be eaten or of the third day. Now the din of a shlomim is korban shlomim is nechal shnei yom v'layla echad, as opposed to other korbanos. A shlomim is 2 days and 1 night. A person is makriv the korban, for instance, on Yom Rishon. On Sunday, he's makriv the korban during the daytime. It's eaten during that day. It can be eaten Sunday night and Monday. 2 days and 1 night. Now the pasuk says legabe shlomim. It says v'yom tzivchach miyachol umimachros v'hanoiser ad yom hashlishi ba'eish yisorif. So now what does it mean, v'hanoiser, that which is left over, ad yom hashlishi, to the third day ba'eish yisorif? So the Gemara says as follows: Yachol yehi nechal or lishlishi. You might think that it can be eaten or lishlishi, meaning at the night of the third day. So therefore, it's your makriv the first day. It's eaten the first day, that night, Sunday night. Then Monday day. You might think it could be eaten also Monday night. So you might think to say that v'dinu, and why would I say that? Because I would say minasor zvachim nechal l'yomech. You have other korbanos that are only eaten for 1 day. Ushlamim nechalim l'shnei yom. And shlomim are eaten for 2 days. Now the korbanos that are eaten for 1 day. A person is makriv the korban Yom Rishon, he eats it that day, and the following night. So malahalan laila achayim, just like over there, the night follows the day, as opposed to in most cases we say that the day follows the night. The Shabbos begins Friday night and continues the next day. The day follows the night. By Kachim, it's the opposite. The night follows the day. So most korbanos, they're eaten during the day and the following night. So Avkan, you would say Avkan, Laila Achar. You'd say also that the night should follow the day. So if it's eaten the Yom Rishon, Yom Sheni, then the following night, Monday night, it should also be eaten. Talmud loima b'yayim zivchachem yayachol omi mochros v'hanoiser ad yayim. So we dash on the pasuk b'yayim zivchachem, the day that you're makriv the korban Yom Rishon yayachol can be eaten on mochros on the next day Yom Sheni v'hanoiser ad yayim, which we darshan b'oid yayim hu nechal. We darshan ad yayim, meaning ad b'oid yayim hu nechal. Well, it's still daytime, not for the night following, not the following night. It can only be eaten ba'id yom hu nechal, ve'ena nechal or shlishi, and it's not eaten it's not eaten on the night following. So according to this drasha, it's we say ve'hanoiser, that which is left over, v'hanoiser ad yom ba'id yom. When it's still day, meaning the second day. The Pasuk Pshat in the Pasuk is v'hanoiser ad yom hashlishi, what's left over to the third day you burn. Here we're darshaning the yom, that it's b'oid yom hu nechal, v'yom zivchachem yeyachal, umimachas v'hanoiser ad yom. Well, it's still daytime the second day. So therefore you cannot eat it on the night following the second day. You might think you burned it right away. Well, you can't eat it. You might think you burned it right away. And v'dinu, and I have a svara to tell you that it should be that way, because what we say is zvachim nechal miyayim v'laylecha. So you have other korbanos that are eaten for 1 day and the following night. Ushlamim nechal mishnei yomim v'laylecha. And shlamim are for 2 days and 1 night. So just like over there, by other korbanos, it's eaten for 1 day. So you're makriv the korban, for instance, Yom Rishon. You eat it Yom Rishon. You eat it the following night, and then immediately after the night, in the morning, it's burnt. So it's burnt right after the time that it can be eaten. So here also you would say Avkan take of lachilas reifa. So perhaps you would say over here also, well, after the second day, you can only eat it up until the end of the second day. So perhaps you'll say you burn it immediately, you burn it right away, and you burn it on the night after that. It's bayom hashlishi. You only have to burn it in the daytime. You cannot burn it at night. It has to be burnt in the daytime. So therefore, shlomim can be eaten for 2 days and 1 night. The day that you bring the korban, you can eat it. The following night, the following day, and you cannot no longer eat it anymore. The night following, then you cannot eat it, but you don't burn it either. You wait till the next morning, and that's when you burn it. But I'll call upon him. What do we see over here? It says you might think that it can be eaten, or l'shlish, meaning the night after the second day, the night of the third. You might think you can eat it, alma or orto. You see over here that or means nighttime. Shmamino. You see, yes, you see that or means nighttime. Tashma, let's bring another raya. Or shel yom akipurim. The or of Yom Kippur, the night of Yom Kippur, the night when Yom Kippur comes in. Mispal Sheva Misvade, Yidam Shemana Esrei, which consists of 7 brachas, and there's a vidui in the 7 within the Shemana Esrei. There's a vidui, there's a confession within the Shemana Esrei. Shachris, similarly, Shachris Mispal Sheva, Yidam Shemana Esrei. It consists of 7 brachas, or Misvade, and there's a vidui. B'musaf mispal sheva o mitzvade. B'musaf also there's a Shemana Esrei that consists of 7 brachas, and you have the vidui. B'mincha mispal sheva o mitzvade, and so too by the tefillah mincha. B'arvis, but mariv matzai yom kippur. Arvis mispal me'en Shemana Esrei. You daven an abridged Shemana Esrei, me'en Shemana Esrei, not the full brachas, but the abridged version of the brachas. You have a shortened version of it. Rav Chanina ben Gamliel, he says no, that you daven the full Shemana Esrei, because you have to say in the bracha of Atachainan, you have to say Havdalah to be Mavdal ben Kodesh L'chol. But what do we see over here? We're starting off on the Seder of Yom Kippur. It starts off on the nighttime, then it goes to Shachris and Musaf and Mincha, but it says, or Shel Yom Kippurim. So you see alma or orto. Shemamino. You see again that or means the nighttime. It's another rayim. Tashma would come to the final raya that or does not mean day. Tashma the Tana de Shmuel, we learned by Shmuel in the Yeshiva of Shmuel, Leile Arbos, and I hear it says clearly. Our Mishnah says or l'arbasar, but he learned leile arbasar, the night of arbasar, beit kimes hachametz l'araner. You do the bedik of the chametz with the candle. Alma or though you see clearly that in the reference of our Mishnah, what it means is or, it means you do bedikas chametz with on the night of Yodalid. That's when you do the bedika with a candle. So you see clearly that our Mishnah, when it says or l'arbasar, it means in the nighttime. So the Gemara says, it's not a machlokes if the bedikas chametz is done in day or nighttime. It's certainly done in the nighttime. And there's no real substantive machlokes between Rav Yehuda and Rav Huna. It's just a matter of speech. Ela bein Rav Huna, bein Rav Yehuda, the kuliyama or orto. Everyone agrees that or, in our Mishnah when it says or, it means nighttime. V'loi pligi. They don't argue. Marki Alsri. It's just local custom. It depends on the local minute. Basre the Rav Huna Karanagi. In Rav Huna, nighttime, they called it light. The Bedikas Chametz is done at night. But when he said that or, it means Nagi, it doesn't mean to say that it's done during the daytime. That's not what he meant to say. What he meant is that what they call night, they don't call it night. They call it nagi. They call it light. It's lashon sagi nar, something which has a negative connotation. You'd say the opposite to dafka make a point not to express the negative. So they called it light. They called it nighttime light. And in the region of Rav Yehuda, they called it night. They called it pasha. They called it night. But the Tana Didan, my time like Tana Layla. Now, our Tana, why didn't he say night? Why didn't he say it clearly? Why didn't he say Laila, like in the Tana Shmuel? Why did he say it in a way which it could be confused? Now, the Chedush Iran says, the Gemara is asking on our Tana. Now, we had all the brises where also the Tanoim use the expression or, but he explains over there it wouldn't be confused. But over here, it might be confused. You might think that you do it by the Aleisa Shachar of the next day. So therefore, since it could be confused, why didn't the Tana express it clearly and say nighttime? So my answer is because the Tana wanted to dafka say it in this way, even though there is some ambiguity, but nevertheless, the Tana wanted to say it in this way to teach you something else. Because Lishna Malya Dinhaket, he uses a Lashon, a Lishna Malya, a refined way of speaking, not to use anything that's negative. And the Miri says in Davka, when we're talking about the beginning of the Masechta, this is the beginning, the first words of the Masechta, so Psicha, the Psicha's Dovar, you always try to use something that's in a positive light. And so use the Lishon Mal, Yishu ben Levi, Damar Yishu ben Levi, Loyal Mal Yitzi Adam, Davar Meguna Mepiv. You should never say something, express from your mouth something which is Meguna, which is something which is not refined, which is coarse. Now, even though the Torah normally says things bekitzer, it says it in a short, in an abbreviated way, rather than saying it in a lengthy way. However, we find in this case that the Torah lengthened its expression, not to say, in order not to say something Maguna, it said it in a lengthy manner. Because we see, it added 8 letters, and it didn't say something Maguna, and not to use a coarse expression, Shenemar. Mina behema tahira, mina behema sharinena tahira. It says mina behema tahira, and it says from the behema asher einena tahira. Now, it could have said it in a shorter way, and it could have said mina behema tzemeya, but it says asher einena tahira. So therefore, it added on 8 letters. It could have said it with 5. It says asher einena tahira, which is 13. So it added on 8 letters. Now, even though we see the Torah does use the word tome several places, so it's not to say that you don't use the word tome, but Davka used an example of lengthening it by 8 letters to show that where it is possible and where it's not, doesn't cause difficulties, use a loshon of that's mu'ula, use a loshon that's not maguna. So, meaning there is a purpose. When there is a purpose to use tameya, you say tameya, because normally we don't want to say it in a way that is lengthy. It makes it more difficult to learn. So normally we would not use it in a manner which is lengthy, but it gives an example in one case to use it in this way to show that where there is all things being equal, or if there's no great difficulty, then use a loshon which is not maguna. It could have said mikra tomu, when tome is only 3 letters, but it says bilti tor kiloi tor, which is 19, and therefore we see it added on even 16 letters. Tanya Bey Rabbi Shmuel continue on this theme. A person should always speak in a refined language. When it talks about the tumah of a zav of a man, it says merikav. Now, by the zav and a zava, when they have these emissions, it's a special kind of tumah. They're matama not only by touching, they're tuma even if they sit on something which is a chair or something which is used for riding, like a saddle or a bed, these types of things, even if they don't touch it. So even if there's cushions one on top of the other, the chair underneath is tome. Because even if they don't touch it, just by the weight that's on them, or the saddle, even though there's a cloth, a blanket on it, and even if they don't touch the saddle, they're also matame. Now, however, the example that's used by a zav is merikav, is something that's riding equipment. Ubiisha kromaishav. And to use this example by a woman, it says moishav, something she sits on. Why is that? Because it's a refined way to talk by a man. You can say writing, but it's not sneistic for a woman to use it in an expression, to use an example of where she's riding on something which involves spreading her legs. Therefore, it uses a lashon of moishav, of sitting, rather than merkav, rather than riding. So therefore, we see that we should always use a lashon of that's refined, lashon nikiyah. As Taisus explains, however, that's not to say that it could have used it in the same way, and could have used it and said, instead of merkav, it could have said moishav by a man. Or it could have said by an isha, instead of saying moishav, it could have said merkav. Because merkav and moishav are not exactly the same type of tumah. By the case of moishav, it's the person is tameh and the clothes have to be washed. It needs kibbutz begodim. By the case of merkav, what he sits on, what the zav sits on, the person who then comes into contact with that item, he himself becomes tameh, but not his clothes. His clothes do not need kibbutz begodim. So what the zav sits on has tumas moishav. Someone comes into contact with that is tameh, and his clothes have to be washed. But something which is a writing equipment, the person comes into contact with it, doesn't need kibbutz begodim. So therefore, Taisus explains, the pshat in the Gemara is not that, well, it didn't have to say merkav. It could only have said moishav, or it could only have said merkav and not moishav, or moishav and not merkav. They both have to be mentioned. But the point is that by isha kora moishav, by the woman it calls it moishav, meaning, and the primary halacha is mentioned as moishav. The din of merkav is only learned out from a limud, from an inference. But what is said explicitly in the Torah by a woman is moishav. It doesn't say merkav explicitly. Now we have to learn out merkav. We learn out merkav, but only from a limud, but not what is mentioned explicitly. The Gemara continues, and the pasuk says you should have chosen the language of the wise. And it says that my lips express refined knowledge. So again, it shows again that we have to talk in a refined way. So my vaimer, why do we have these additional rayas? You might think that yes, you brought me a raya that you have to speak, that speaking has to be done in a refined way. You might think that's only by Torah. But the Rabbanan, things that are Rabbanan, you see it by the Torah. But how do you know even by the things limudim that are the Rabbanan, the members of Rabbanan also have to be said in that way? So the lashon of the Arumim, the wise, as Marshal says, it's Chachamim, Talmidei Chachamim. Their dibur also has to be in a refined way. You might think, okay, but the Raisa and the Torah and the Milid Rabbanan, but Aval Milid Alma, speaking which are not involving Torah or halachas or members of the Rabbanan, but just regular mundane speech. How do you know that also should be done in a refined way? It says, Das Vasai, my lips, whatever I speak should be that Svasai Boror Mileo, it should be refined, it should be in that manner. So we did mention, we brought the raya from the fact that by the Isha it does not say Merkav. Frankly, the Gemara of Isha like Siba Merkav, it does not say Merkav by an Isha. I vaksiva takim Rivka v'narasav v'tir kavna l'gemolim. It says by Rivka, it says that she got up and her maidens, and they rode tirkavna l'gemolim. So you see that it does use a lashon of Merkav by women. More answers, Hasamishum be susa. That's because of the fear of the camels. Orchahi is considered the normal way. So what is pshat in that? So it's much from Taisus that he's learning as follows. Hasamishum be susa de, since a woman, by riding on a camel is very high, and she's afraid of falling, so she does ride in the normal way. She doesn't sit. She doesn't ride side saddle on a camel. She would ride it on the normal way. So therefore, the truth is, is that that's how she would write it. It's Merkav in the normal way. So therefore, therefore the Gemara is saying that the pasuk would not change and write something that's not true. Now, even if it writes, wants to write in a refined way, it writes it in a refined way, but it doesn't distort the fact. It doesn't distort the emes. So when it's talking about tumah of a merkav, tumah of a maishav, well, it doesn't write merkav by a woman because she normally does not ride that way. She sits, she rides side saddle. But by the Gemalim, the fact of the matter is that that's the way she has to ride because of fear. So the Torah is not going to change the Lashon, even though it wants to write in a refined way, but it's not going to change the reality. The Sas Emes learns it somewhat differently. He learns that, still, it doesn't have to say yeshiva. Ein Hanami, it would not write something which is not the truth, but it doesn't have to write yeshiva. That they could have written it in a neutral way, that v'telachna, or that they traveled in a certain way. It doesn't have to write it b'feirush that v'tirkavna. So therefore he explains it as follows. He says that it wants to teach you, it writes b'feirush that they rode, that rechiva, to teach you that it is proper for even snuais to ride in that manner, where there is a element of fear. Don't think that an isha tsunua should therefore not sit in that manner, ride in that manner from a camel. It dafka tells you that they rode vatirkavna to teach you that it is proper for a woman to ride in that manner where there's an element of fear. But otherwise, you should always use a refined language.